And so you didn't have the whole nation in the War of Independence for the United States. You really only had a third of the nation involved. And if you go back to other eras of time, let's talk about like the Civil War. You know, I was just reading a great research book the other day. The border states between the North and the South are kind of like the church right now. Because the border states like Maryland, and what do they do when the South wants to succeed and lead the Union, and the issue is economics and slavery, and the North wants to eradicate slavery or keep the Union together? If you're in the border states, what did you do? And here's the thing. What did the churches preach? The churches had to come up with a message. And you know what their message was? It's a lot of what people are preaching today. Stay out of the political issues. Unfortunately, history was overtaking them. They had no choice but to figure out if they were for or against staying in the Union. And that's eventually where it's going to come to for Americans. You're going to have to choose whether you're for or against the agenda that you're being required to submit to. But now if you look back on it in retrospect, you realize that being neutral isn't, it may seem like the wise thing to do at the time, but maybe it's the wrong thing to do in the light of history. So you look back at the Civil Rights Movement, you know a lot of the reason why the black and white race divide exists is because when the hour came for the Civil Rights March forward, a whole lot of white churches didn't participate and help out their black brethren. They didn't see it as a Christian issue worth engaging. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to stay out of politics. But now you look back on it now, and you say, well, if I'd been alive then. But you see, everybody says that. If I'd been alive in the, American, colonial war, if I had been alive during the Civil War, if I had been alive during Martin Luther King's day, how do you know? The only way you know is by what you're doing right now. If you're not engaged right now, you probably wouldn't have been then. I heard one wild Pentecostal preacher once talk about tithing. I never heard this thing put so clearly in my life. He says, if you can't trust God with 10 pennies on a dollar, don't tell me you can trust him with wealth. See, what he was saying was, if you can't trust God with a tithe and 10 cents on a dollar right now, don't talk to me about what you're going to do when God gives you millions. That's a great point. So, but you have to have, but then again, I can understand the rationale for not being involved. Why would I want to get? I don't want to get involved with a subject matter that is needlessly controversial, unless what God's doing right now is an issue of discipling nations. Now, if you're discipling nations, it's a little bit different than reviving nations. How are they different? Well, discipling nations has to do with the belief systems and the structures that are shaping the culture. Now, I'm part Jewish, so here's a great old example. If you were alive during the rise of National Socialism, and you could go back in history, wouldn't you have wanted to get the churches together in the 1920s and get all those born-again evangelical pastors to understand the danger of what they were not paying attention to as Adolf Hitler was mobilizing the National Socialist movement? The thing's going to galvanize into the Nazi Party. They're going to start hurling 6 million Jews into the camps. If you could see the end of what's beginning, you wouldn't draw such a hard line between engagement and not engagement, because you see that by not getting engaged, you're going to get swallowed up in the torrent and the rapid of history very soon.
Wow.
And then what will you do with your appetite for revival and the anointing and visitation and the power of God when it costs you something to open your mouth? It costs you more then than it does now. So we have, I'll never forget, I just did a conference in Orlando a year ago, and sometimes the Lord tells me to do stuff. Now, I don't know if you know this, you probably do know this, but a lot of times when we say the Lord told me this, Lord told me, especially if you're a speaker, one would get the impression that we hear God more distinctly than other people. The truth is, whenever I hear God, I always wonder if it's me. I never had this audible voice experience where I'm convinced that's God. And I'm thinking, is that you, Lord? But over time, I start to realize those odd thoughts that come to me from out of left field that are repeated over and over again, that's actually the Lord. Mm-hmm. But it would be great if there were words of knowledge like Sean Bolts or something like that, where I could just do it in a meeting and increase my credibility like that. Mine are always controversial words. So in 2015, I'm with a group of Cruz and Rubio and Huckabee and